It is good to be back with you on this second hour of Chris Jansing Reports. At this hour, take two. Texas voters heading to the polls again, this time for the U.S. Senate runoff. Can a longtime Republican stalwart survive a challenge by a diehard MAGA candidate who has the president's backing? Districts denied. A three-judge panel just blocked Alabama's plans for new voting maps that would have left the state with just one majority black district. Now the state is signaling it will appeal to the Supreme Court. Plus, new threat. Iran's supreme leader says no U.S. bases in the Middle East are safe after American forces launched a series of strikes. The rising tensions now threatening to upend peace talks. And petrol whiplash. World oil prices climbed again after a new attack on Iran. Now the mixed messaging from the president that has traders on edge. Our MS Now reporters are following all of the latest developments, and we start in North Texas, where voters will finally put an end to one of the nastiest and most expensive Senate primaries ever. MS Now's Jake Traylor is there. What are you hearing there, Jake?
Yeah, Chris, a central theme from the conversations we've had so far with folks here at this polling location in Plano, Texas, is that people are voting not necessarily for candidates because of the candidates itself. Let me explain what I mean by that. When it comes to folks voting for Ken Paxton today, the embattled Texas Attorney General, so far the folks that have told us their reasoning for supporting Paxton is largely because they're so pro-term limits. They are tired of having John Cornyn be their senator for 4 terms now since the early 2000s, and they say it's time for fresh blood. When it comes to the folks that are supporting John Cornyn, the incumbent here, they are talking less about the accomplishments that he has had over the past 20 years and more about how embattled and problematic Ken Paxton is. This is an individual who is facing allegations amidst a messy divorce that's carrying out very publicly, someone who was impeached by a Republican House here in Texas. But the individuals voting today are more about the person they're opposing than the person they're supporting. That's really illustrated here in a couple of the folks we just spoke to. Take a listen.
I just believe in term limits, and they've gotten by with murder when it comes to being in office forever. They become a fence post that's just not going to move. They stay there forever. As far as I'm concerned, they need to go out of office after 3 terms.
Look at his record. He's lined his pockets. I think he's abused his office as AG for Texas. It amazes me that people continue to vote for him, and I've got a lot of friends who do, and I respect that. Yeah. But just not my type of candidate.
Chris, all of this, of course, is underpinned by Trump's 11-hour endorsement of Paxton. He said that Cornyn was not loyal enough to him, despite the fact that Cornyn literally has a picture of himself and Trump on his website homepage, touting 99.2% similarity in voting in alignment with Donald Trump. But this is a pattern we've seen over the past couple of months. Trump has been purging his Republican Party of anyone who is not loyal to him, and he's been pretty good at it. We saw that take place in Louisiana with Bill Cassidy. We saw that a few weeks ago with Thomas Massie in Kentucky. And now today, Trump's Texas-sized challenge is picking off John Cornyn.
Jake Traylor, thank you for that. Now to the ruling shutting down Alabama's plan to use a map with only one majority-minority district. I want to bring in MS Now's Fallon Gallagher. Walk us through this ruling and what comes next, Fallon.
Yeah, Chris, a federal court in Alabama is rejecting the state's plan to use its new congressional map for the midterms this year, finding that this newly proposed map is tainted with what they're calling race-based discrimination and a violation of the 14th Amendment. And I want to read from you very briefly from this ruling because it's pretty remarkable. These 3 judges write, "We do not lightly intrude in state affairs, but our previous review of the undisputed evidence left us in no doubt that Alabama's legislatively enacted plan intentionally discriminated based on race in violation of the Constitution. Our re-examination in light of Calais yields the same conclusion." And that ending is key because it explains how we got here. Of course, the Supreme Court last month issued a blockbuster ruling in Louisiana v. Calais. That ruling found that Louisiana's congressional map, which intentionally created a second majority-minority district, was what they called an unconstitutional racial gerrymander. They found that Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act did not compel the state to create that second majority-minority district. So once the Supreme Court issued that ruling, a flurry of southern states filed appeals in courts to the Supreme Court, asking the court to reconsider their congressional maps ahead of the midterms. And of course, Alabama was one of those states. They filed their appeal to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court vacated the district court's order, meaning they lifted it temporarily, and sent it back down to that panel of 3 judges to reconsider whether or not they would change their ruling in light of Calais. Now, these 3 judges have done just that. They've reconsidered their initial ruling, and they find that their initial decision still holds, that the state must use their old map, not the new map, because the new map is still unconstitutional. And of course, Alabama has already signaled that they are going to appeal this ruling. And because it's a redistricting case, Chris, this skips the appeals court and goes directly back to the Supreme Court. So this will land right back in the high court very soon. And of course, time is of the essence because the congressional districts in question have primaries on August 19th. Chris?
Yeah. Fallon Gallagher, clock ticking. Thank you. Now to Iran's supreme leader, who's vowing to retaliate after a series of U.S. strikes. MS Now's David Rode joins us. Do we know what even this means for peace talks?
It's not good for peace talks, but I want to be fair. The U.S. Navy said they took these actions yesterday because their forces were threatened. Some of the Iranian missiles on the shore look like their radars were targeting American ships. You sort of lock on to an American ship before you fire a guided missile. And separately, there were Iranian speedboats. This is according to the New York Times. That were laying mines. So that's why the U.S. took this action, and it was defensive. But overall, the talks are not going well. The president says there's close to an agreement, and then there isn't an agreement. And now you have the Iranians pushing back with their own rhetoric. So I'm not optimistic about a deal anytime soon.
Yeah, and what about one more, let's call it complication, that Israel and Hezbollah are exchanging fire again?
Yes, the fighting there is intensifying. The talks there have gone fairly well. They've been overseen by, Secretary of State Rubio in Washington. But just now, again, there are more New York Times reporting that Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu has announced that Israeli forces are going to move farther into Lebanon beyond the sort of line that had been marked for as part of this ceasefire. So things seem to be intensifying on that front. And the Iranians, to sort of gain support in the region, are saying, we're not going to open the Strait of Hormuz until there's more of a peace deal in Lebanon. So it doesn't look like things are going well overall in negotiations at this point.
David Rode, thank you for that. We're also watching oil prices rise after those U.S. strikes on Iran. CNBC's Pippa Stevens joins us now. What are we seeing today?
Well, Chris, we saw Brent oil top $100 per barrel as Iran vows to retaliate for those strikes. But the reality is that if and when there is a deal, we will see a drop in oil. But increasingly, market watchers are saying the long-term damage has already been done. So not only will it take months for traffic to resume to pre-war levels once the Strait of Hormuz is open, there's a sense that the price floor for oil has now been lifted since there will be some sort of geopolitical risk premium priced in, and global inventories will have to be restocked. Now, we've seen a record rate of drawdowns, including from the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and refilling that increases demand looking forward. Now, the pump is the most obvious place where consumers are feeling the impact, with gas hovering around a 4-year high, while diesel prices are up nearly 50% since the war began. It's sometimes called a hidden tax on the consumer, since diesel is used for trucks and trains that transport goods. But the inflationary impact stretches far beyond oil itself. You know, petrochemicals from oil and gas production are used in some 6,000 consumer products, everything from aspirin to perfume to keyboards, meaning those manufacturing costs are rising. Now, the Middle East is also a producer of helium used in semiconductor manufacturing, fertilizer, sulfur used in copper production, as well as aluminum. Aluminum prices did hit a 4-year high today as production in the Gulf remains shut in. And so the impact on consumers might not be immediate for all of these things, but these higher prices will ultimately, Chris, trickle through to our pocketbooks.
Pippa Stevens, thank you. Meantime, we're following some breaking news out of Washington state. Crews responding to a major chemical explosion at a manufacturing plant. Officials say multiple people suffered chemical burns and other injuries in the blast at a Nippon facility in Longview, which is near the border with Oregon. Details are limited, but officials describe many of the injuries as critical or life-threatening. The facility contains a Kraft pulp and paper mill. It employs about 1,000 people. Officials still working to confirm exactly what caused that explosion. In 90 seconds, we'll take you to the protest at an ICE facility in New Jersey where detainees are reportedly on a hunger strike.
I think it's very clear that there are people who are willing to put themselves on the line to try to resist exactly everything that's going on with this administration when it comes to the immigration issues.
Right now, protests are underway outside a private ICE detention center in New Jersey. And inside, about 300 people are reportedly on a hunger strike over what they say are poor conditions, including rotten food and inadequate medical care. Clashes have erupted between protesters and ICE agents over the past few days. You can see one person here being dragged by their arms across the pavement. There it is. Nope, that's not it. And yesterday, Democratic Senator Andy Kim says he was pepper sprayed. Now, DHS Secretary Markwayne Mullin is calling the protests a, quote, political stunt by New and denying reports there even is a hunger strike inside. MS Now's Mark Santia is outside the facility in Newark. I also want to bring in HUD Secretary, former HUD Secretary and 2020 presidential candidate Julian, MS Now political analyst. So, Mark, what are you hearing on the ground there?
Oh, Chris, we have seen tensions flare up here a short time ago. Take a live look behind me. You can see protesters as well as ICE officers. We did see protesters shoved to the ground by ICE officers. We also saw an ICE officer injured and taken away limping from the scrum. We have not seen any arrests. Tempers have since cooled. About 24 protesters are standing together today outside Delaney Hall, telling MS Now there is no place they would rather be today.
Why is it so important for you to be here?
Because I feel what we are doing in this country is so unjust and inhumane. We are ripping apart families. We're causing tremendous hardship. And we all have a duty to speak up and not be complicit in this very, very cruel system.
There are reports of a hunger strike inside by some detainees against what they allege are inhumane conditions. DHS Secretary Markwayne Mullin saying, quote, there's no hunger strike at Delaney Hall. There are no subprime conditions. Now, a public records review from our investigative unit, Chris, has found ICE's own internal watchdog had previously flagged issues during an inspection here at Delaney Hall last year. The inspectors flagged 12 detention standard issues, including some in food service, and recommended the agency work with the facility to resolve them. We are reaching out to ICE to see what changes were made, what the results were from this inspection last year. Chris?
Thanks so much for that. So, Secretary, Democratic Congressman Rob Menendez about who he met. Take a listen.
Every time that we're here, we use it as an opportunity to talk with the individuals who are being held here because it's important to tell their stories. Like an 18-year-old from New Jersey who's missing her high school graduation because she's inside the Delaney Hall. She's missing her brother's 8th birthday this week because she's inside Delaney Hall. Women who are pregnant who are inside Delaney Hall. Women who had just given birth months before they were apprehended by ICE who aren't able to nurse their newborn children because they are inside Delaney Hall.
So he got in, obviously, Mr. Secretary, but this is not the first time or first place we've heard these kinds of stories. Some of them from inside have been harrowing by people who actually witnessed it. Are Democrats powerless to do anything? Is the best that they can do is what we heard from that one protester who said she felt she had to show up?
No, I wouldn't say the Democrats are powerless. I mean, they're doing one thing that's important now, which is shining a light on the abuses, on the failures of this system. This Delaney Hall is a private detention facility that is owned by the Geo Group, of course, a huge corporation that has had many kinds of similar complaints launched against it over the years. The other thing Democrats have done, of course, is in the budget process to refuse to support new funding for ICE until matters like this are addressed sufficiently. So there's a lot that they can do to push back and to continue to shine a light on this. The other part I would just invite viewers to think about here is you have hundreds and hundreds of desperate circumstances. They've lived hard lives, have dealt with intense poverty, Many of them just want to get back with their family, and they're worried that if they rock the boat in any way, that basically they're going to get deported. And even then, the circumstances in this place are so bad that 300 of them have chosen to go on a hunger strike and to take this action that I bet they know makes it more likely that they're going to end up separated from their families are in Delaney Hall.
Actually, we haven't seen the major clashes like we saw in Minnesota, but we know the White House has actively taken steps to carry out immigration efforts more quietly. Can Democrats, and I guess maybe should Democrats, get immigration back in the public eye the way they did back then? Or strategically, is their time better spent on the economy? I wonder what you're hearing.
A couple things. I mean, those clashes in Minnesota and those two Minnesota killings were a negative, and understandably so, turning point for the Trump administration, where one of his signature issues, immigration and border control, went too far. So it did show that there is a line that this president sort of gleeful sense from the White House that images of, if they against ICE and law enforcement, they originally thought that was beneficial to them, and that was not the case. Now, to specifically answer your question, Democrats who I've talked to and Republicans who are worried about this say the most salient issue is, as it ever was, the economy. But immigration is tricky for the Democrats because there is a sense most voters, including Democratic voters, want some sort of border and Republican, but they don't necessarily want the, inside privately owned ICE facilities. They didn't want in his first term, families, mothers and children being split apart. But for Democrats to engage on immigration, according to polls, focus groups I've watched, and Democrats I've talked to, they need to be able to hold the line on basic things like law and order and border security, while also offering potentially a more compassionate approach than we're seeing out of this administration.
Secretary, let's go back if we can for a minute to access, because New Jersey's Democratic Governor Mikey Sherrill says she was denied access to the facility and wrote this in a statement, quote, "They don't want oversight or accountability. There should be no reason that they wouldn't have people in the prison to show that it is being run well." And it raises the question, if there is nothing wrong, why not let the governor in? Some Republicans would argue is because it's going to be used then for propaganda. But how do you see this? And again, what can be done about it? Who has oversight?
Well, Congress does. Delegation from New Jersey, Representative Menendez, were able to go in. And here, really, they're just, they're pulling this federal and state distinction. But I think underneath that, Chris, is the important point that there's a through line here. Under Donald Trump, DHS and Minnesota was a very good example of that, specifically investigating what happened to Renee Nicole Good after she got killed and what happened to Alex Peretti when he was shot and killed. They didn't want state and local authorities involved in those investigations because they don't want anybody else involved in monitoring what's happening, getting to the truth. Fundamentally, they don't want the accountability that comes with others getting to participate in the process. And in this case, it's the governor of New Jersey. They want her out.
Ashley, 911 calls at these places are on the rise, with more than 1,000 emergency calls made over the last year. Obtained by NBC News. 28 of those calls reportedly involved serious self-harm. There have been 5 reported deaths by suicide this year. It speaks to what the secretary was saying about the desperation inside. But I wonder, given what you were just talking about, which is there is this kind of push and pull. People want a secure border. They think one thing went too far. If this is your issue, is going to show up in the fall? Is it going to show up in the Latino vote?
Again, in hearing Democrats talk about it, Democrats will, as most Americans do, want some form of border security. They do want, but the flip side you hear from voters are a compassionate people. Nobody wants to hear of people in ICE detention centers who are so desperate that they're engaging in self-harm, that they are successfully committing suicide, that, that an 18-year-old is missing for high school graduation. These are always the stories, rightfully, that tug at heartstrings. And so one of the lessons I've heard Democrats reaction to what Trump was doing on immigration, which Democrats and much of the country, for instance, that period when everyone was talking about abolish ICE. To Democrats, they say, we are done with the messaging of abolish ICE or no immigration enforcement whatsoever, but we can be compassionate, we can be humane, and we can also enforce the borders and the rules and laws of this country in a way that we are not seeing President Trump and his administration do. So that seems to be the sweet spot for most of them, at least in an ideal world.
Ashley Parker, Mark Santia, thank you both. Secretary Julian Castro, please stay with us. Next, could one of the most reliably red states in the country test the limits of how far right Republican voters will go? They say everything is bigger in Texas, and boy, are they right about the Senate race that has voters at the polls right now. More money spent, more TV ads shown, and by the way, two Republicans diametrically opposed in both personality and background. The outcome of the brutal runoff between the four-term incumbent Senator John Cornyn and far-right MAGA ally Ken Paxton is arguably the most consequential race in Donald Trump's midterm retribution campaign. I want to bring in Tara Setmayer, former GOP communications director, co-founder and CEO of the Seneca Project. Julian Castro is back with us. Mr. Secretary, you know this state. You ran, city council, mayor's races. Your brother ran for Texas State House and Congress, all successfully, I might add. What will the outcome of this race tell us about the Republican Party?
Well, it's going to tell us which faction controls the Texas Republican Party. I mean, Chris, this has been brewing for a long time. This is the John Cornyn wing. Cornyn, first elected to the U.S. Senate in 2002, came up basically as a business moderate Republican, somebody that was known for years and years as a person who could cross the aisle, who could help deliver bacon back home to Texas. Not part of the Tea Party when that came up in 09 and 10, and not MAGA initially. And on the other side, Paxton, who was the campaign chairman for President Trump, total MAGA, 100% on board, also a tremendous amount of baggage. And tonight will tell us where the Texas Republican Party is. And like a lot of folks, I have a feeling that that's going to be Ken Paxton. And that's going to be due not only to Donald Trump's endorsement, but because MAGA has taken over the Texas Republican Party, and because John Cornyn over the years has twisted himself into this political pretzel trying to appease Trump and the MAGA base, and in doing so has both lost his political identity, his authenticity, and also all of it has driven away the people who used to vote Republican in Texas that were his bread and butter, the suburbanites, the business Republicans, those moderates. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of them in the Republican Party, but many of them have also left and are no longer voting in a primary. I think that's going to hurt him today.
Tara, I want to play for you some of what we're hearing from voters at the polls today.
Did President Trump's endorsement of Ken Paxton sway you to vote for him?
It didn't hurt, but I had already made the decision.
Trump endorsed Paxton. Did that alter your thinking of maybe supporting Paxton because Trump endorsed him, or did you feel good about defying Trump in that instance?
Trump's endorsement for anything doesn't change my voting.
It surprised me that he supported Paxton, but even though I am a Trump supporter, nothing he does really surprises me anymore.
I think that's what a lot of people say, Tara, but I wonder what you think the endorsement did, and do you agree with the secretary? Do you think Paxton's going to win tonight, and is that good news for Democrats?
Well, I do agree that I think Paxton is probably going to pull this out. I mean, John Cornyn has actually been running from behind since last year, which is why he spent so much money starting last summer, like $70 million in 6 months to basically break even with Ken Paxton. So that's not a good position to be in when you've been an incumbent, you're a senior senator, well-known, large name ID, and you're running behind someone as ethically challenged as Ken Paxton. I mean, Ken Paxton is... he's corrupt. His wife divorced him. He was impeached by his own legislature in Texas in 2023 for intimidating whistleblowers, and he's enriched himself while in office. I mean, he sounds like somebody else we know. Donald Trump. He's in his same image and likeness. Trump was always going to endorse Ken Paxton because he saw he's simpatico with him. And Ken Paxton has been defiant and thumbed his nose at the establishment, just like Donald Trump. So
Trump also learned he didn't pay a price, right, for those kinds of things. And so it was really interesting. The New Yorker spoke to a bunch of people, but there was one woman who said, quote, that's not, and talking about the different things that most Christian conservatives you would think would find offensive, like getting divorced on biblical grounds. But this is what she said. That's not a good decision that he's made, but what matters is what he's doing for the state and for the country. I mean, when did the Christian conservative wing of the party, was it with Trump, make it feel like it's so easy to look the other way?
So when did the evangelical wing of Christianity become political hypocrites and moral hypocrites? It was, it's been years in the making, decades in the making, when they've decided to use political power as their North Star as opposed to biblical teachings. That's obvious. And, there's the rise of Christian nationalism and the justification, using biblical justification for their support of Donald Trump, for the violence, for the unethical behavior, the indecency, the lying. I mean, that is all. An evangelical right has lost its moral compass and moral way, which leads you to what's happening in Texas. The fact that someone like Ken Paxton would even have a chance, and that Donald Trump's endorsement would, it's the biggest self-own politically Texas could possibly have. Now you have a safe seat, would have been a safe seat under Cornyn, is now in play because of this, because there are other people who are going, wait a minute, I'm not so sure. And that's correct. They lose the seniority in the Senate, which matters for chairmanship and things like that. And when you're in the Senate, you're losing, assuming that Cornyn loses, you're losing a senior senator who's by all measures been a good senator for the state of Texas, all because Donald Trump said so. This is where you get into the cultish aspect of the support for Donald Trump for the people who continue to do that, because you look at them kind of struggle for how they're justifying someone like Ken Paxton over a John Cornyn. What was John Cornyn's big cardinal sin? Because he wasn't loyal enough to Donald Trump? That is not a politically salient position to be in when you are fighting for your control of the House and Senate in such a crucial midterm election year where Donald Trump is so unpopular. And, it gives Democrats an opening where they shouldn't have been. But good for them. I think this is the first opportunity Democrats have had to win a statewide, an office like this in many decades, since Ann Richards.
Tara Setmayer, please stay with me. Secretary Julian Castro, you already stuck around, so thank you very much. It's always good to see you. Up next on Chris Jansing Reports, early voting is underway in South Carolina, too, and it's not clear these ballots will even count. Still, look at these lines. It's not stopping voters.
So I think this is our show of force that we're not happy about how things are going, and hopefully it's enough to change some minds.
Today, the stage is set for mass confusion in South Carolina. Now, we're seeing long lines of voters at the polls, but They have no clear sense of whether the primary ballot they cast today will ultimately count. That's because state Republicans are working to finalize a new congressional map that could wipe out the only seat held by a Democrat, Congressman Jim Clyburn. Here's what he said today.
To the 29% of African Americans in Democratic voters in South Carolina, irrespective of your presence, you are not deserving of a single member of Congress of the 7 that we have. This White House says, to hell with the process. To hell with the Constitution.
Shame, shame.
Just do what we want done. And that's what has us here today.
MS Now's Alex Tabbitt is covering this for us in South Carolina. Rebecca Piercy is a Democratic strategist who served as political director and senior advisor for Elizabeth Warren's presidential campaign. Tara Setmayer is back. Alex, set the stage for us. What exactly is happening in South Carolina right now? I'm kind of blown away as I see the video of those lines.
There's a lot going down in South Carolina right now, Chris. Right now in the state Senate, the Republicans are hoping to finalize a new congressional map, which, as you noted, could oust Representative Jim Clyburn from Congress if the Republican plan goes to their plan. The polls, and that's why you see scenes like this one. Dozens and dozens of voters snaking in and out of the pews of this Baptist church in line, hoping to get their votes in as quickly as possible. And that's because in their mind, the Democratic playbook right now is get as many ballots cast as quickly as possible so that by the time this congressional map gets finalized, if it does get finalized, there is a strong legal argument to overturn it. They can point to all the votes that have already been cast and make the argument you're throwing out these people's votes. You're intervening in our democracy. Now, why is this map so controversial? Well, for one, it would oust Representative Clyburn. It could potentially leave no Democratic representatives in the House from the state of South Carolina, and that's incredibly notable given that 25% of the state or so is African American, about 40% of the state votes Democrat. So this is seen as a massive disenfranchisement. Now, I've been talking to voters all day about why they're out here in the middle of the Tuesday, on the first day of early voting, in the middle of thunderstorms. I want you to hear what they had to say.
This current administration has already demonstrated that they are willing to strip rights and privileges that we have as citizens for their own personal gain. So it's important that I'm here in order to make sure I'm on the right side of history and my vote is cast to demonstrate that I do not agree with what's happening.
Yesterday, I talked to the Republican state representative who was behind this map, one of the co-sponsors. He told me race had nothing to do with this.
I'm sure he did. They always say that. We know better. We live it every day. Every day. So, you know, it's easy for someone to say that who doesn't live it, but we live that every day.
And Chris, I showed you the voters inside. I want to show you the voters outside. Look at this. A huge line of cars, dozens and dozens and dozens of voters who are driving, who are voting via drive-through. This is voting for people who are 65 years and older, people who are disabled, people taking time out of their day to take a stand to push back against this new congressional map, which might pass at any moment now. Chris?
I'm just curious because it's just sitting there, right? I don't see any movement. Have you seen people getting out of line or they're just waiting patiently? Whether they're in their car or whether they're in a line?
There was an influx of people who went inside due to the thunderstorm. But I'll tell you, Chris, I've been here since polls opened at 8:30 a.m. this morning. There has been a non-stop surge of people coming to this polling location and to 2 other polling locations that we've visited this morning in South Carolina. The energy, the enthusiasm is palpable. Chris.
So, Rebecca, you know this. Let's just say that off elections and a runoff are not exactly the kinds of times when we're used to seeing people showing up in overwhelming numbers. What do you see when you watch what's happening in South Carolina right now?
I mean, you are totally right, Chris. This is chaos, but I think it's a powerful kind of chaos. And this is exactly the kind of thing that makes people so furious about politics. The message is basically the voters can show up. The election is already underway, but the people in power in South Carolina, the Republicans in power in South Carolina, I should say, think they should be able to change the outcome by changing the lines midstream. And to me, that's not democracy. This is pure manipulation. And we should be really honest with ourselves about what this is connected. In power, wherever they can, whenever they can, through aggressive gerrymandering that we are all watching in real time. So it's not just us watching it on the news, it's these people living it in South Carolina. So to me, this is not about fairness. It's about a constant rule changing. It's about who has the advantage and insulating these Republican politicians from accountability by making the map do the work that their persuasion no longer can. I think that they thought they were going to lose a lot of elections and went out of their way to create a new map once voting was already underway to ensure that they could lock in their wins before any votes were cast.
Tara, do you think the message got out, get in line, because if we get enough people to vote, then maybe even if they take this to court, then we'll be able to make a strong argument?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, isn't this supposed to be about voting rights, and more people should be able to be eligible to vote? And this is that's BS. Of course it is. They're trying to disenfranchise their power in the South. There's a reason why this is all happening. People, on the Democratic side, want people to start voting and getting in line and getting as many votes cast, because then you have a strong legal case that this is about disenfranchising voters. And we all know that this is a sacred cornerstone of our democracy. So it makes it like, why now? What's the rush? Why does South Carolina have to do this? Why do all these other states have to rush back in the middle of elections to try to, quote, rig the system? The Republicans and Donald Trump have been the ones that have been whining about, oh, the system is rigged. They're trying to change the rules. They did all this during COVID, during a pandemic, trying to claim that those votes weren't valid. But why now? We all know why. Listen, South Carolina has a very, very difficult and, unfortunate history when it comes to race. Jim Clyburn was elected in 1992, the first Black representative in 95 years from the Voting Rights Act passed in 1965 for South Carolina to get a Black representative. It basically took the Supreme Court to create these districts through the Voting Rights Act so that you could actually have that opportunity. There is a reason why, and people need to ask themselves this and stop dancing around that this is not about race. It is absolutely about race and representation. It's absolutely about taking this country back to Reconstruction days and pre-civil rights and voting rights days. It's absolutely about consolidating white Republican power in the South. And that has awakened a sleeping giant in the Black community in these southern states. And for this not to happen. So if they want to take us back to a time in this country where be honest about it. Don't try to BS the American people into believing that this is not about disenfranchising people of color, because that's exactly what it's about, because they're afraid of the power of minority voters and the changing demographics in the South, period.
Alex Tabbitt, Rebecca Piercy, and Tara Setmayer, thank you. Up next, Democrats aren't waiting for the November election results to map out their fight against the White House. We'll explain that. Democrats in Congress are already making plans if they retake the House in November, telling MS Now they've begun laying the groundwork to launch several investigations into President Trump. MS Now's Michael Schnell joins us. What are Democrats exactly looking to investigate?
Yeah, Chris, basically anything that was controversial that the Trump administration has done in its first year and a half or so in office, Democrats already have their eyes set on investigations into that. For example, Robert Garcia, the top Democrat on the House Oversight Committee, told MS Now that his panel is already prepping teams to look into Jeffrey Epstein, to look into the Department of Homeland Security, ICE, alleged Trump family corruption. They're prepping letters and research. And listen to what Robert Garcia said. He said, quote, "We've got a team on Epstein. We have a team on Trump family corruption. We have a team on DHS and ICE. Those teams are actively working on preparation, letters, and research." It's not just the Oversight Committee, Chris. It's also the House Judiciary Committee. Democrats on that panel led by Jamie Raskin. He is also looking into this alleged corruption involving the Trump administration and Trump family. And of course, this is in a way a little bit premature because the midterm elections aren't until November. It's unclear who's going to win those. Democrats certainly have a little bit of a pep in their step and are hopeful they could take control of the House, given the current political headwinds in the country, the economy, and other things. Also, the trend that in the first midterm election of the president's party usually loses seats up on Capitol Hill. But essentially, they don't want to be caught flat-footed in the case of them winning the majority in November, and then come January, they get the gavel, but almost more importantly, they get subpoena power, which could really put some teeth to these investigations. Though one big question, Chris, if they do take the majority that they're going to have to answer and approach head-on is this question of whether or not to pursue the impeachment of Donald Trump. Throughout the past year and a half, scores of Democrats have said they believe that the president committed impeachable offenses on a number of different topics. Whether or not they'll be willing to go down that path, though, could divide the caucus. We'll have to see. But again, already right now, they are laying the foundation for a potential majority and potential investigations.
Michael Schnell, thank you. And that's going to do it for us this hour. But we are just getting in some breaking news. It appears the South Carolina Senate has rejected President Trump's push to redraw its congressional maps. It would end the last-minute redistricting push for now, but we're working to find out more. Our coverage will continue with Katie Tur reports next.